Hi, can you see me? Yeah, I think so. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure exactly how this all works, this online conference, but I'll just start. And if you have any questions, I can see the chat box, so you can always just comment if you don't hear me clearly or something like that. So first of all, thank you for having me here. And as you see, you can see by the title of my discussion or the presentation, the topic is on how to achieve blockchain mass adoption and the role of social media. Now, I'll introduce myself sort of along the way. And I do assume, just judging by the title and the people who have joined, that you are either interested in the topic or you're in the blockchain space, maybe. Maybe you're an entrepreneur working on a project with the goal to achieve mass adoption, or you're interested in blockchain, but maybe you don't yet really know how it works or what it is. But either way is fine. I'm not going to dive into the real economics or the technology of how everything works. But I'm just going to take a more general approach here that applies to pretty much any form of innovation. And it's sort of like looking at the bigger picture of what makes a successful technology and also a company. And so because I truly believe that behind every great innovation, you have to have a great team of people. And so in order to take an innovative approach and take an innovative concept and turn that into mass adoption, or introduce a technology that's so innovative like the blockchain, to bring that to a mass market and achieve mass adoption, there are certain key components that you need. And so let me try to share my screen right now, because I did prepare a few slides that we can just go over together. So hold on. So I'm pressing play right now. Now, can you let me know if you can see this screen? Oh. Okay, can you see my screen? I hope so. Okay, well, let's start about just a little bit about my background and how I got into it. And so interestingly enough, before diving into the topic and preparing something for this presentation, I went back to my blog from 2016. If anyone of you is familiar with the first blockchain that enabled content to be produced and then people to earn cryptocurrency in return for their interactions. That was in 2016 on a blockchain called Steem. And so I just pulled up this article. This is what I wrote 4 years ago. So I think it's quite interesting. So what you can read here is when I first heard of Bitcoin cryptocurrency, I'll never forget the comparison I was confronted with: radio, TV, internet. And the next major change that is going to be a decentralized banking system, digital coins, and no real money. Now this sounds all pretty weird to me, and my brain definitely shut off especially when I tried to explain this technology to someone. They would always look at me like this is a crazy system, like some mathematical equations, and it's just super complicated. And so I just put up this picture of how the word cryptocurrency looked for people from outside the system or who were in it. Here you can just see an overview of this. Was 4 years ago. And now why I want to explain this to you and talk a little bit about my own journey is because I understand and I relate to the average person who from the outside thinks like, why would I get into the space? What is going on? It sounds way too complicated. But I always say, if we had to understand how to use the internet or understand how electricity works, then no one would actually use it. And so it took some time for me to get into it, but because firstly, I always say I was really curious, but then also being surrounded with people like my now co-founder, he's been in the space, in the crypto space since the early days. He's been a Bitcoin miner since 2011. And so, but the fun part or the interesting part here is, even though he told me about these things in 2013 and I learned about crypto, it wasn't until 2016 when the first use case, a first use case came out, where I felt like this is something I can do. I could just write a blog post and then get cryptocurrency in return. And so when I did that, and here you can see my first time at the Bitcoin Exchange meetup to talk about this new platform, and I wrote some other articles. And when I was able to then transfer these, the dollar amount here that was paid out in a cryptocurrency, transfer that over to Bitcoin and then turn it into euro, actually having it on my bank account, being able to buy coffee with it, that's when it became real. And so, yeah, I just wanted to put that up to remind ourselves that really something like we can talk about, I can talk about blockchain technology and why decentralization is great, and like block producers and like what's happening with the halving, but these are all terms people from the outside don't quite understand. And so I just wanted to put myself back into like 4 years ago when I wasn't really in the space. And so I just go on here with the article that I wrote, where I say here in the bottom part, humans are cynics and instinctively doubt anything that disrupts their current belief system. We're afraid of change, afraid of the unknown, and at least the majority. So yes, people differ and some are higher risk takers than others, but when it comes to mass adoption and believing in the new, this just isn't what I think, but it's what history has proven over and over again. And here you just see sort of the time span and the different time spans it took for certain technologies to become mass adopted. So what you can see through this is that the time span has decreased drastically. So it's a lot easier now that we adapt to new technologies than it was before. But it still takes some time for us to get used to new habits, to new thinking patterns. And especially if the traditional systems that we're using are still working, then the problem doesn't become as clear. So again, this was my article 4 years ago. This was the last part here where I say, this pattern is nothing new. Before doing some research, but I had no idea how long it actually took for electricity, for example, to reach mass adoption, or television, or the internet. That it took 31 years for people to believe in radio, 18 years in color television, and 7 for people to believe that the internet is real and a digital world exists. And so again, this tells me 2 things. Number one, that no matter how major the invention, that adoption takes some time. So when people say, why isn't it that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are yet super mainstream, even though they have such benefits and advantages over blockchain, over the current systems and are amazing alternatives. But it does take some time. But now on the positive side, the time span has decreased drastically, and now it'll take a lot less of a time for us to get used to these new systems. Now, so in this slide is actually quite interesting because I think we all know the adopters cycle, or this curve where you have the innovators, the early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards that catch up very late. But I think some of I think more the chasm is, oh, can you hear me? The internet connections, it says the internet connection is not stable. Okay, well, I'll go on then. But yeah, so the chasm is the break in between before you move from early adopters to early majority. And so right now, in my belief, and being in the space for the time I've been, I believe we're right in that middle. Like right now, it's the transition, and it's not a matter of, is the technology gonna succeed? Is the technology gonna move to early majority, late majority? That's gonna happen, but it's a matter of who fills that gap, or who makes that bridge happen for people. And so, yeah, this is just like a brief, even what I did before, like a history lesson. If you understand like how other technologies work, and you can just apply the same thing here. And Jeffrey Moore, yeah, so he actually explains, saying that crossing the chasm as the products being moderately and hugely successful, And it is nothing but making the transition from an early market dominated by innovators, early adopters, to early majority. So for crossing the chasm, the company has to transform from a sales-driven company to a user-driven company. And I think this is huge because then we're talking about how do we reach the mainstream and really make it about them, because people essentially care about the benefits of things. They don't care about learning how things work. I mean, maybe a minority does, but most people just want to know that it works. And so I think right now is really the time where we can focus on real use cases, because the market has been tested and we've experienced the whole Bitcoin hype. Here you see the comparison to the dot-com bubble, which probably a lot of you are familiar with as well, where we had this peak in 2017 of just Bitcoin being all over the media, people talking about it, and you could feel this hype, the hype buildup around cryptocurrency, especially around Bitcoin. Most people hadn't heard about crypto at that time, was just Bitcoin. And so the problem with that was that the overexcitement about blockchain, about crypto, and the hype was faster than the adoption of the underlying technology. So blockchain couldn't keep up, right? And so that's what happened. And the same thing happened with the internet. There were tons of investors that just invested in any company that had a domain or was on the internet because it was going to be the next big technology. But of course, that doesn't work. You can't just base the success of a company off of the technology. There's other aspects that go into it. And so those aspects I'm going to explore here in a little bit. But yeah, so now I think we're really ready to differentiate between cryptocurrency and blockchain and identify really core issues in the world, and really see the benefits of blockchain for what they are. So here is just an example of, we all know IoT, the Internet of Things, what the internet can do, and that it's been used for so many different use cases. And whether you are an expert in blockchain or not, I think it's pretty clear to understand that we are transitioning to a new technological era. The evolution of technology isn't slowing down anytime soon. And with this new technology, blockchain, it introduces something that we like to call Internet 3.0, where we're able to not only share and distribute information, but really also transfer value, have a system where we don't need centralized corporations or any middlemen in between. And so what I think should be the focus, so right now, security and privacy issues are increasing in so many different areas and in markets, due to these different centralized applications and corporations. And then also there's a real need for transparency at the moment, and the elimination of just really expensive third-party services. So there's tons of things like the transparency, for example, in the food industry, where we would all love to know and track our food. Where does it come from? Smart manufacturing, to have a way where we actually know how the distribution and how the retailer and the factory, they work together. So that could be solved again through blockchain. Healthcare is another big one. And then there's tons of other applications. Right now we have thousands of applications of different blockchain applications. But the starting point was the financial sector by launching cryptocurrencies. And so then the next step was to track and trace different things and applications, like I said, with the food, through smart contracts. So smart contracts was the next level. And I think now we're really at the point where we can focus more on decentralized applications, and that's going to be the next step, so-called DApps. So I think that's really the future that we're heading towards. Before, it was more systems designed like to prevent ticket fraud as well, or to verify IDs and things like that, to verify transactions. And I think now we can really, like, after the hype that I just talked about here, and like having this hype now slow down, and now it's really time together with the Bitcoin halving that some of you probably know is going to happen really soon. We can start building on top of the technology without focusing so much on the crypto aspects of things. And so the blockchain, in essence, being a decentralized peer-to-peer network, allowing for fast and secure transactions, and really providing an alternative to our current systems, means essentially that what we want to achieve with it is an independent system from these corporations. But of course, what's going to happen is that the big players don't want to miss out. So right now we have like Facebook introducing a Libra stable coin. They've been talking about it for a while. We have Google and Apple working on their own cryptocurrency MasterCard, where you can buy and purchase things with, and like all these companies getting involved. Microsoft, like you can see a list here of companies that want to get into the crypto space. So the whole, the reason why I'm listing this is because like massive, when we're talking about mass adoption, what I mentioned earlier as well, that like it's gonna happen anyway, and now it's just a matter of who's gonna like bridge the gap over the chasm. And so I think like right now is a perfect time to triple down on and think about what can we produce and bring to the market that and have this early mover advantage. So for example, my co-founder, as I said, from this is my company, APPICS, it's a social media platform based on blockchain that rewards its users in form of a cryptocurrency token. But so what we designed in our head was like after I was blogging on this platform that I showed, where I produced a blog post, and I could see I could earn real currency for that. Like that was great, the technology amazing, but the whole issue was with the user experience. It wasn't something that I could introduce my girlfriends from high school and say, hey, you know, get on this platform, because they're used to a different type of user experience from other platforms like Instagram, like Facebook. And so what we needed to design was something brand new and create something that is very a clear use case. It solves a very distinct problem, like manipulative algorithms on these platforms that interrupt the user feed, having these different not just algorithms, but also ad algorithms where it interrupts completely your user flow. And so for our goal was to create an easy, simple, and exclusive access to gain from the benefits of blockchain without having to understand the technology. So to have cheap or even free access to this technology, to then achieve widespread awareness and introduce some early influential adopters that can then spread the message that are reliable. So I'm going to go over just quickly here like our different points of how we go about it. And it's quite funny to me because looking back now, I just realized these points. These were things like we as a company were doing along the way, but I'm just now starting to unpack and understand these different components that lead to the brand that we currently have and that we are moving towards mass adoption with an application. So yeah, and also quickly just to say, like, I don't think all these big corporations, you know, are not using technology wisely, but we always should keep in mind that technology can either be used or abused. And so I think if you have like smaller players coming in with the vision to do good in the world and to empower people, then that is the right approach, and we don't need to wait on these big corporations to implement the technology, and so for their own personal gains. And so I think this, again, we should not wait, but start creating and building. And this is really the first stepping stone, is to create and understand how do you want to communicate a message out. So first, of course, it's about problem solving, understanding what problem are we solving, and why do we want to bring this to a market, who would be interested in that, and then making an easy and inclusive access so that users don't have to, there's not a barrier to entry, there's no risks involved, but they can simply test it out, just like pressing or turning on the light switch in your home. It should be as easy as that. And so this should be, I believe, for all the great technology companies, the approach, because I've been to like tons of crypto conferences and it's always been the same, like amazing technology that they have, but then when it comes to the execution, there's always this level of where you have to have a certain level of education in order to get in. And so I think it's just extremely important to focus firstly on the access and the user experience, to always put yourselves in the shoes of who's using those applications, or who's benefiting, or who's the end customer audience. Yes, and then also to co-create an experiment. Now this is extremely important, because if you want to build something new and be an innovator, then it's about really discovery-driven learning. And what that means is that you act and implement strategies opposed to just planning and then making up scenarios in your head. So that's one thing we've also really been focusing on, is making sure that we have different people in our team, not just the core team, not just our founding team or like the board, but have everyone on the team be able to co-create, experiment, and we will put out, like, let's say a problem presents itself with how to store data, and then we have the different teams, different approaches, and we test all of them to really know what works the best. And so that's what I mean by collaborative competition as well, is being able to take different approaches, have different people work on the same problem without it interfering with each other, but just benefiting the growth of the project or the company. And then collective decision-making is another one. We truly believe also at APPICS that no great decision just comes from a single person, or not even 3 people if you're a multiple founding team, but it should be a team effort. And especially what we do is we're really hands-on with the community, so with the people using the platform that are on it, because essentially those are the ones who can most relate and understand what's going on. But I'll get to that again in a second. A creative adjustment is also really important to, what I said, test and adapt quickly, but also look for negative feedback. The reason why I say this is I read this book, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, and he talks about this, that essentially you should look or place the approach, or see the approach as a guided missile, where you try something and then you look, and once you get negative feedback, that's actually just a tool to then learn and know what other direction to go. So like oftentimes I see projects failing or not going forward, not going to that next step from early adopter to later majority, or even, you know, being that patient, because it takes a lot of time. And if you don't have the approach of, or the mindset of, I'm going to change the approach, listen to the market, but not change the goal. So be really mean on the goal, understand where you want to go, but then you can always just adjust the approach depending on how the market reacts. So I think this is also a very important one, to listen to the market and then change the approach, not the goal. And another one that I thought about just yesterday evening, because I was looking at our board where we structure things sort of like Trello. It's a communication tool. And one thing I noticed is we have an internal feedback group, not just one, but several, for testing the app, for the development, but then also for marketing strategies and other things. And one thing that I've really learned from my co-founder and CEO of the company, who's, like I said, he's been in the space for a very long time and mentored a lot of people into getting into the crypto space. But what I've learned is that what he does is, instead of leading from a hierarchy position, from being on top and sort of wanting to make all the rules, he leads from a volunteer point of view, a volunteer organization, where it's not like, you know, you just go into a company, and I think this should be in any startup. You don't want to just go to a company to get a paycheck, but you should really get people that share your vision, because in order, again, to go into mass adoption and reach that critical point, you will need a really strong and solid team. And this goes for any innovation, but especially for a technology like this, where it's quite complex, and you need this foundation of people that you can rely on. So we have a volunteer feeling where everybody is just super passionate about the topic. And this is also where tokens can come in. If you have a cryptocurrency, your own cryptocurrency, you can, pay your people as well in tokens, give them a portion, like at least I would say like 50% in tokens, just because then they're even more invested into the company and into the project. But yeah, I hope that all makes sense. And then listen to all opinions. That's also what we do. And this is what I meant by the feedback loop that we have, where we have different groups and we can see all the different comments, and we'll take into account every single opinion and just discuss it internally. See, hey, does that make sense? Who agrees with this opinion? And the reason why this is important to do is that you don't lose focus or lose the relationship to the end customer, to the consumer. Because oftentimes projects will, and I feel myself sometimes with this happening when I do a presentation on stage and I talk to an audience where I already, go into detail about things and don't really take a step back and see, wait, these people are not even are familiar with blockchain. So I can't just go off and really be in my own perspective, but you have to then again put yourself in the shoes of those that you want to have as your target audience. And so, yeah, this is why I said the best thing you can do is pay your employees in tokens. But of course, I understand fiat currencies is also needed. And then, of course, community first. This is, again, a really crucial one. So the way we market is from 3 different angles. So the first one is from the top, which is having reputable influencers, influential people that can spread the word. And if they put up a post or they talk about your company, your project, then other people will trust it automatically. But the other approaches, and this is, I think, very important that not many people focus on so much, is to have a strong global community and ambassadors across the world. So the first thing I did in 2018, after we founded our company, was I went on a global tour with my team, and we selected different ambassadors, people around the world in different countries, local markets that understand their market that better than we do. And so we've learned so much. We have people here you can see in South Korea and Bangladesh, Brazil, Russia. And so all these different people, again, they communicate to their peers differently. And so if you want to create a global movement, which is needed for mass adoption, it should be your brand, and the movement should be recognized, and it should spread really organically, mouth to, what do you say that? Mouth to mouth or word to mouth. And so I think this is extremely crucial to have local people on the ground spreading the vision. And again, being on that volunteer basis, because they feel like they relate to you and they understand where you're coming from. So I'm just going quickly through this because I'm already running a bit late. So the hierarchy of ego, this has been the traditional way of how companies were running things. And so instead of having the CEO at the top, really put the community first. And I think if all projects on crypto and blockchain and innovation would do that, we would see a really faster spread, because again, people are power. If we empower people, which is also the core value and the core idea of behind blockchain, then we can really just accelerate and scale things a lot quicker. And yeah, then to create a space to co-create, so gathering collective intelligence. I always say in the crypto space, there is no competition really, because we're working towards this goal to spread or to empower people to spread awareness that there are alternative systems, make the lives of people easier, make them better, bring more justice and fairness into the world. And so again, here, market judgment is extremely important. Predictions based on politics and technology. So always watching what's happening in the market, not bringing in so much of your own thoughts, but just basing things off of history of current events, and that way predicting how the market moves. Because again, in order to like launch an ICO or like do a fundraising or go into just launch in general on exchanges, launch a project, this has to do with timelines as well. So you need to look and observe the market, and then cooperating with different companies that are doing similar things in the space. I think this is super important and something that we've been really working towards, always reaching out to projects. Like we are a sort of Instagram application on blockchain, and then there's others that are building like a YouTube format, a Spotify format, and so we can reach out to these people, share tools, knowledge and resources. And again, this is a way that we can move faster towards mass adoption. And now this one point why I put in the role of social media, because content creation in this day and age is so important, and I think still extremely underestimated. Like a lot of projects will have like maybe a Facebook account, a Telegram, and a Twitter account, but they disregard how important it is to build an online community. And you do that by being active on these different mediums, on these different platforms, and also communicating effectively depending on what medium you're on. So every medium has a different language, right? On Instagram it's more visual, on Twitter it's like short texts. And so this is extremely important. If you don't have people that know how to build a brand on social media, then you should get people to do that, to either share your vision and just get into the project because they want to support it, or hire people. But this is extremely important for brand reputation, transparency, and then marketing foundation. This is the whole foundation for your marketing. So yeah, I just put this again here, that you should be on all the different platforms to experience this widespread reach. Really create your brand reputation, and transparency is so important because it shows people that you are not just a company or a project, but there's actual people behind it, and you can show them what the process is like, so to communicate effectively. And yeah, that's it. I think I'm like it's half now, so the conclusion is to, in phase one, observe the current state where we're at, learn from the past, look at the patterns of technology, of the evolution, of the digital evolution, and then create a really clear concept, identifying a common problem. And here I just want to mention one thing. Maybe you don't need a cryptocurrency, maybe you don't need the blockchain. I think it's about really finding out what the problem is and then seeing what can solve it. And if blockchain can solve it through its mechanics, then that's great, but maybe you don't need a cryptocurrency, or the other way around. So I think this is, again, something to think about. And then in phase three, you want to create and communicate a really clear brand identity that everyone can recognize, create this really smooth user experience, and then grow a global community of at best ambassadors that are locals, because they understand the market often better than you do. And yeah, then in a fifth phase, this is not just a phase, I think this goes all the way through, it's to co-create instead of lead. And this is what I've, again, learned from my co-founder as well, that real leadership means inspiring and supporting the project, the company, and the people, instead of making all the rules. And so if we focus on these different key aspects and components and collaborate, co-create instead of compete, I think in a very short amount of time, and very soon, we can head towards and see mass adoption, not just from the big players because they're implementing these technologies, but use that just as marketing for the smaller ones that can bring the vision to life that blockchain, that we all believe blockchain carries, to make the world, again, more decentralized, more fair, and more just. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Thank you for listening to me just going through this, brainstorming a little bit here. And if you want to follow our project, what I do, you can check out our link tree here, APPICS, and there's all the different sites that you can check out. And yeah, I think I have to get off. Hold on. Resume share stop.